went in with very low expectations and it exceeded every single one of those by a lot. I gave this book 2.5 stars after almost giving it 5 stars. Look, I actually like the love interest of this series better than the love interest of Blood and Ash, which is saying something. The book that I don't know how to talk about, the book that I want to talk about, I read the scene, and I have not stopped thinking about the scene ever since. If you saw my August TBR game, you are probably dying to know how I did with my August reading. I had 23 books that I was supposed to read. So, did I accomplish it? Was it worth it? And what did I think of the books that I had to read? Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam. If you're not new here, welcome back. We're going to talk about all the books that I read in August, the most chaotic month of my life, but a really great reading month, actually one of the best reading months in terms of certain stats that we will talk about in a moment. But I'm so excited to share these books with y'all. So the goal here is to keep this video under 30 minutes, and we have a lot to talk about. So let's get right into it. Before we jump into the stats and the books, if you have not already hit that subscribe button, don't forget to do that before you leave, and the little bell icon will notify you when I post. Right now I'm posting on Sundays and Wednesdays. Alright, let's jump into the statistics for August. So, question number 1. Did I read all 23 books? Short answer, no. However, I got very close and I actually read more pages this month than I ever have. This was my highest page count, so technically this was my highest reading month, even though I didn't actually hit the most number of books. So for August, I read 19 books, and I actually DNF'd 2, so technically I started 21 out of 23. So I'm super happy with that. That went really well. I also had an average rating of 4.07, which is pretty typical for me. I had a lot of 5-star reads. I had a lot of rereads that I kept with their 5-star rating this month, so 4 stars is pretty typical of an average rating for me. And my favorite statistic is the number of pages that I read. So I read 8,294 pages in August, which is almost slightly over 800 pages more than my previous best back in June. I did read more books in June, but some of them were shorter, so I ended up reading more in August, even though I read a few less books. And I'm really happy with that. Honestly, I think page count matters a lot. I was doing a lot of reading, and I had a lot of really thick books that I read this month, and I'm really proud of the amount that I got accomplished. So for our genres, we had 6 fantasy, 1 horror, 4 romance, 3 sci-fi, and 5 thrillers. Y'all know, if you've been around for a little bit, I've been struggling so much with thrillers, so the fact that we read 5 in 1 month is a pretty big deal, and I actually really enjoyed some of them, so we might be back on the thriller train. For formatting, I had 3 audiobooks, 4 ebooks, and 12 physical books. So pretty typical there, mostly physical because I do like to read books off my shelf. For our audience breakdown, we had 8 adult, 1 middle grade, 6 new adult, and 4 young adult. Pretty typical breakdown there for me. I do tend to have more adult, new adult than young adult and middle grade. Alright, so let's jump into the books that I read this month. We're going to do this in order because I do think that the order that I read them in is very telling of how my mood was shifting throughout the month. I'm gonna try to go through them as quickly as possible while still giving you the information that you're here for and the point of this video and talking about the books. But we're gonna try to go through as quickly as we can so that we're not sitting here all day because there are a lot of books to talk about. The first book that I read this month was Reckless Girls. This is by Rachel Hawkins, and it is an adult thriller that follows 6 people, young 20-somethings, that all go to this kind of deserted island with kind of a not so great past. Some sailors were stranded on this island back in World War II, and there were rumors of cannibalism and a lot of other sketchy things, and they are all on this island kind of for like a little vacation, but some sketchy things start to happen. And I really don't want to go too much further into that because I do think that the dust jacket itself is kind of a spoiler. And I don't want to elaborate on that because I don't want to spoil things. But this was really, really good. If you like anything with deserted islands or that type of thriller with like, if you like Agatha Christie, you will probably like this book. I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. I really, really liked the ending, and it does jump back and forth a lot between like the past and the future. I do kind of wish that One, I wish it was a little bit longer, but two, I also wish it was a little bit shorter. The book is not very long. I wish that the first half had been condensed a little bit more and then the rest of it had been drawn out a little bit more. That's what I wish, because I do feel like the first half was very slow, but then the second half just kind of was like over like that, and I kind of wanted more. But all in all, 4-star read, would highly recommend it. Next up, I read From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the first book in a series, and it follows Poppy, who is a maiden in a world where she is waiting for her ascension, and she doesn't really know what that means, but when she turns 18 she will ascend. It's supposed to be this big deal, and until then she is forced to wear all white, and she wears a veil that covers her face. People can't like see her or talk to her or touch her or anything, and one of her guards that has to be with her at all times is killed, and she gets a new guard, and Hawk is very different from her old guard, and things are going to escalate very quickly from there. This is a new adult fantasy series. It is one of my favorites. I have seen a lot of mixed reviews on later on in the series. People either love the series or they hate it. I feel like there's not a whole lot of in between for most people. I'm in the camp of I love this series. This was a reread for me. I read this last year for the first time and I was obsessed with it. I tabbed it last year, and this year I actually went through and kind of changed up my tabs a little bit. But if you like new adult fantasy romance, this is a solid read. If you are more into characters than plot, I think this is even better for you. I am more into characters than I am into plot, which is probably why I am still in the camp of still loving this series. The third book I read was Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the third book in the Illuminae files, and basically the whole series is following an illegal colony was on a planet, and they were attacked by another corporation. They had to flee, and the story is being told from the point of view mostly of two teenagers who have made it off of the planet, and the ships are being pursued by one of the enemy ships, and they're trying to make it to a jump station. And then the second book is about the people on the jump station, and then the third book is back on that original planet, and it's all interconnected, and they're all told in like chats and like some AI and documents and like different things like that. It's super cool. I would highly recommend the audiobooks for this. If you can listen to the audiobook and read it at the same time, even better. I personally can't do that because I read a lot faster than I can listen to something, so it was confusing me, but I listened to just the audiobooks and they were phenomenal. It's a full cast. They're amazing. This was actually my least favorite of the series. I gave this one 4 stars. I gave the other two both 5. I just did not connect to the new characters introduced in this book at all. I loved the characters from the first 2 books. I just didn't connect with them in this book, and so that's what dropped my rating down, was I just wasn't invested in their story. And the other characters are still in this book, so I was still invested in like that part of it, but there was just a lot of this about the new characters that I just didn't care. But it was still a solid young adult sci-fi series in a really interesting format that I would definitely recommend. Next up, I read The Final Empire, which is the first book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. This book follows kind of a lot of things happening. We have like the typical evil overlord, and then we have this group of thieves that all have some sort of elemental magic, and they are involved in this plot to kind of take back the kingdom from this evil overlord person. It's a heist novel, but it's more than that. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of fantasy. It's not like I went into this, when I found out it was a heist novel, I got a little nervous because I was thinking Six of Crows, and it definitely has Six of Crows vibes, and I hated Six of Crows. It was not my cup of tea at all, but I loved this book. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I really enjoyed the characters. It was so much fun to read. I actually flew through it so much faster than I thought I would, and this is a chunky book, and I can't wait to read the second book. So if you liked Six of Crows, I think you will love this. If you didn't like Six of Crows, I still think you should give it a shot, because I went in with very low expectations and it exceeded every single one of those by a lot. Next up, I read Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. This is the second book in the Blood and Ash series, and this is where things start to get really fun for me. I love the second book. I tabbed this one a lot more than the first one. I think this book is really fun. I think the characters get a lot more developed, and I'm much more interested in the plot at this point. I still think, like, up to here, we still had people. It was really the third book that we can talk about where things might have started to go wrong for certain people, but this one is still a solid read. Personally, I think they're all a solid read, but we can debate that later. Next up, I read Deep and Dark and Dangerous, and I gave this book like 3 stars, but when I was the age group for this book, I gave it 5 stars. So I think if you are like upper elementary to lower middle school, or you know someone who is, I think it is a really, really great book for that age group. But this follows our main character, Allie, and she finds an old photograph in her mother's attic, and her mom won't answer who the other person in the photo is that's been like partially cut out. But she doesn't want to talk about it, and the photo was taken at this lake house that she has never been to, that her mom won't talk about, but her aunt asks her to come to that lake house, basically to nanny her niece, and her mom does not want her to go, but she ends up getting to go, and there she meets Sissy, who is a really mean little girl, and definitely something very suspicious is off about Sissy, and lots of scary things start to happen from there. It's a middle grade horror. It's very, very straightforward. There's not a whole lot of like mystery to it. Like, you kind of know what's happening from the beginning. But it is really cute, really cool. I mean, it's not really cute. It's kind of scary for like middle school level. But I enjoyed it. I liked rereading it. I wouldn't say that I liked it more for the nostalgia at this point. But I think if you are of this age group or know somebody who is of this age group, it's a really good choice for that. Next up, I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. So this follows our main character, Mariana, and she gets a call from her niece who she and her husband raised, and her husband died like 18 months ago or something. And her niece's friend has been murdered at college, and so she goes to comfort her niece and finds herself kind of in the middle of this investigation. And the girl who was murdered was a part of this group at the college called the Maidens that were kind of a slightly culty little group of girls who were obsessed with this Professor Edward Foshka. And he like tutors them on the sides, but it's all very sketchy, and Mariana is positive that he is behind the murders. And other people start getting murdered, and she's involved in this investigation, but nobody believes her about this professor, and it kind of spirals from there. I gave this book 2.5 stars after almost giving it 5 stars, and let me explain how we jumped from up here to down here. So if you do not like to hear about thrillers and twists and reveals, and if anything like that is going to be a spoiler for you, skip the next 2 minutes. But the twist in this book comes out of nowhere. There are no clues to it whatsoever. So when I first finished it, I was like, oh my goodness, I did not see that coming. That's fantastic. There was no part of me that guessed that, like, at all. No way. And so I was like, that's a 5-star read to me, because I love being surprised by thrillers. But the more I thought about it, it really felt like a cop-out, because there were no clues to it at all. There was nothing suggesting that that was a possibility at all, and I didn't like that. I like being able to be like, wow, I can't believe I missed that earlier, but there was nothing to miss. Like, I didn't miss anything. It just came out of nowhere. I also just did not understand the motivation behind the events, like, at all. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. So I dropped it down from there. I wanted to like this book, but I just couldn't. I mean, honestly, there was not very much that happened in this book. It was very repetitive and very slow. And the only reason I thought it was a 5-star book at first was because I was so shocked. But the more I thought about it, the less shocked I was, I guess. So I think I would still recommend it if you like thrillers. But I don't know. The Silent Patient was so much better. Next up, I read Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This is a domestic thriller that follows our main character, Grace. And Grace seems like the perfect housewife. She seems to have the perfect life. She has a wonderful husband. They are very wealthy. She is able to stay skinny even though she's allowed to eat whatever she wants, and she just seems like that person that every other woman is jealous of. But there are some suspicious things happening here, like why Grace is never seen without Jack, why she's always declining invitations to go out with girlfriends, why she never takes anything with her when she leaves the house, like not a pen, not anything, like her purse is completely empty, and there's just kind of some suspicious things happening here. I liked this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. It is not what you're expecting at all at the beginning. Like, you think typical domestic thriller. It's more than that, I promise. And I did really like that aspect, but you find that aspect out so early in the book that the rest of the book is less about any type of reveal and more about fixing the problem kind of thing, which I enjoyed, but I didn't love. I wished there had been more like mystery to it, more. I just felt like the book got very, very repetitive, and it probably could have been a little bit shorter if this is all it was going to be. But I still really enjoyed it, and I still would recommend it if you like domestic thriller type of things. Next up, I read Chasey Mccree by J.C. Isabella. This book follows Briar and Chase, and Briar is a cheerleader from Miami, and Chase is a cowboy from Montana, and Chase has been staying in Miami with his mom to kind of get to know her a little bit more now that he's a little bit more grown up. They are both in high school, and Chase is literally riding like an actual horse through downtown Miami, and he finds Briar, and she's very drunk, and he kind of helps her and brings her home with him so that she doesn't get hurt, and then he like brings her home the next day, and they kind of start to become friends. But Chase is leaving at the end of the school year to go back to Montana because he does not like Miami, and Briar decides to go with him for the summer, and then their friendship kind of starts to develop from there into a little bit more. And it's just so cute. I talk about this book a lot because it is one of my favorite young adult romances. It is such a relaxing read. I mean, you're not going to get anything groundbreaking here. It's not like the most amazing book you'll ever read, but it is comforting. Like if you like Hallmark movies, this is like that. It's comforting. It's totally predictable, but you don't care. There is like plot, there is conflict, and it's done very well, but the conflict does not have anything to do with the romance, and I love that because it is so rare in a romance novel for the conflict to be completely unrelated to the romance. Like the romance is just sweet and fluffy and cute the whole way through, and I love it. It's so cute. I love to read this book like in between stressful reads. Next up, I read The Hawthorne Legacy. This is the second book in the Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and this just continues on with Avery's story. In the first book, she found out that she inherited billions from a billionaire. He basically wrote off his whole family and gave her everything. She doesn't know why. She's never met him. But when she gets to his mansion, it's like full of all these riddles, and there's definitely like secret tunnels and something kind of not quite normal happening here. It's super cute. If you really liked Truly Devious, or if you liked the concept of Truly Devious but not the execution, this is the book for you. I wanted to like Truly Devious. I loved the concept, didn't like the execution. I love this series. This is what I wanted out of Truly Devious. It is such a fun young adult mystery. Less thriller, more mystery, but I really enjoy it. Next up, we have The Book of Cold Cases. I listened to this as an audiobook, and I kind of wish that I hadn't. I wish that I had physically read it, but this is by Simone St. James, and this follows two dual points of view. So we have the point of view from this woman who was accused of a bunch of murders, and she eventually was let off, but everybody assumes that she did it. And then we also have the point of view of a blogger in present time who is interviewing this woman and basically trying to get to the bottom of it. She wants this woman's story. It was good. There are some horror elements, which I kind of liked. That was very interesting. I like when there are like subtle horror elements to a very typical thriller. I thought it was really fun. But I did think the audiobook was kind of hard to listen to, and I did miss things. So I do think that I want to revisit this in the future and read it physically, because I just think I missed a lot of the good things. So I ended up giving this like 3 or 3.5 stars because I just kind of missed the good parts, I think. Next up, we had Uninvited by Sophie Jordan. This book follows our main character, Davy, and Davy's entire life falls apart when she tests positive for the HTS gene, which basically means that she has homicidal tendency syndrome. So anybody who tests positive for this gene is more likely to commit a violent act in the future. So the people with this gene are like being marked and kind of separated from the rest of society, and there's a lot of really interesting commentary on human rights in this book, and just like the whole concept is very interesting to me. But Davy is kicked out of her private school, and she is sent to a public school where she and other HTS carriers are basically kept in like one little classroom that's essentially like a cage, and they are basically written off from society. And it spirals like a lot from there. It is a duology. I am planning to read the second book. I gave it 5 stars. I enjoyed it so much more than I thought I would. I went into this with really low expectations. It's been sitting on my shelf for years, and I really just didn't expect much out of it, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I really appreciated the commentary that it was making. I thought it was really intriguing, and the romance, perfect YA romance. Like, if you like 2012 era of romance, maybe like 2015 era of romance in young adult literature, this one. Next up, I read The Crown of Gilded Bones, which is the third book in the Blood and Ash series, and this is where we start to lose people, and I can understand why. I totally understand the argument that like 60% of this book could have been cut out and you would not lose any of the plot. I get that. However, I still like it, and I think that's because I like those fluffy moments that don't necessarily move the plot forward but are just kind of cute. Like, I enjoy those parts of books. That's why I really like the Outlander series. There's a lot of that in there too. So for me, this still works. I tabbed this one probably just as much as the second one. I like them both. I can understand people's arguments against this. Are there some, spelling errors and editing errors? Yes. Do they take away from the story? Honestly, not really. Not in my opinion, and that might just be because I, had my fanfiction era, and so I got really used to reading a lot of errors. Like, I don't find there to be that many to where it becomes distracting. But I still really enjoy this book. I do agree. My one minor complaint is our love interest by this point is less sassy, more sappy. And I'm not feeling the sappy. I like the sassy. Like, let's bring him back to the sassy man that we all fell in love with, please. But that's my only complaint. I still gave it 5 stars. Next up, I read A Shadow in the Ember. This is the first book in the prequel series to Blood and Ash, but you have to read it after book 3 for it to make sense. And this book takes place way, way, way before the events of Blood and Ash, and we are following Seraphina. And she is also a maiden, but in a much different fashion than Poppy. And she has basically been raised to be the perfect wife. She is promised to be the consort of the Primal of Death, who's like a god, and he is supposed to come on her 18th or 19th birthday and take her away. But he comes and he takes a look at her and then he leaves without her. So then it spirals from there. There's a lot of things that happen in this book. I actually like the love interest of this series better than the love interest of Blood and Ash, which is saying something. I think my friend that I have been reading this series with and I have decided that the love interest in this book gives Rhys vibes from A Court of Thorns and Roses, and the love interest in Blood and Ash gives Cassian vibes. So, depending on what side of the fence you're on there, will probably tell you which one you're going to like better. I love both, but this Rhys vibes are my favorite thing. And then, the book that I don't know how to talk about, the book that I want to talk about, the book that I have a lot of feelings on. I read The War of Two Queens. This is the 4th book in the Blood and Ash series. It is the last one that is out so far. And if you know anything about this series, you know where this is going. If you have read the series and you know about the joining, this is where this is going. So I have to talk about this in as family-friendly of a way as I can, but I loved this book. And I know a lot of people didn't, and I don't know why. I felt like the plot picked up here. I felt like a lot of people complained that Poppy was kind of like mopey at the beginning and kind of like just feeling sorry for herself, and like, I mean, I can see where you might feel that way, but also given what happened at the end of the 3rd book, like, I would be too. Like, I can't blame her for the way that she's feeling or the way that she's acting in the first half of this book. I can't even imagine going through something like that and not feeling and acting that way. Like, that's exactly what I would expect from that kind of trauma. So, I don't really understand the argument against her there, but to each his own. This book was very interesting for tabbing for me, and someday I will share my tabbing system if y'all are interested, because it'll tell you a lot about the series and about what I thought. But I want to talk about the thing. I want to talk about it, and you know what thing I'm talking about, and I want to talk about it, but I also like to keep my channel family friendly. So, I'm going to be very vague, but I read the scene, and you know what scene I'm talking about if you have read the book or if you know much about the series. I read the scene, and I have not stopped thinking about the scene ever since. And I am both excited and extremely nervous for future books in this series. And I'm probably going to leave it at that, but if you have read this book and you also read the scene and you want to talk about it and you need someone to talk about it with, please DM me. I would love nothing more than to talk about this because I have literally not stopped thinking about it since I put the book down. I do think there is a very important factor in whether or not you like where the series is going, specifically if you like where that part of the series is going, is do you like Kieran? Kieran is my favorite character, by far. So I think that influences why I'm still enjoying the series and why certain things are still stuck in my head weeks later. So if you don't like Kieran, then I guess I can kind of see why you wouldn't like the direction that this has gone in. And that's okay. We can each have our own opinion. It's fine. Next up, I read Terra Nova. I don't actually own this book. I got it off Kindle Unlimited. It was a TBR treat for me, but we got placed on a book buying ban about halfway through the month, so we did not buy all of our TBR treats, but it's fine. If you saw my TBR game, you know that this is the book that I had intended to read thinking that it was the same thing as the TV show. It's not. Apparently the TV show wasn't even based on a book, so there's that. But I decided to read it anyways, thinking that maybe I'd at least get similar vibes. I did not at all, but it's fine. So this book follows like a second wave of colonists who are traveling to Terra Nova on a different planet that was colonized 15 years ago, but the like portal to it or whatever only opens every 15 years. So this is like the second wave that is going to join the original colonists. But when they get there, all of the colonists are gone and there's these things on the planet that are trying to kill the newcomers. So it's less about like the establishment of the colony and more about figuring out what happened to a lost colony and then trying to like fix the problem kind of thing. It definitely reads like a low-budget sci-fi movie, which is not necessarily a negative thing. I do think low-budget sci-fi movies have their place, and there are some that I thoroughly enjoy, and I am occasionally in the mood to watch one. So I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing, but it is a thing. I'm a big dialogue person. Dialogue is a struggle for me if it doesn't sound super realistic, and that was my one big complaint with this book. Like, I could have gotten past the plot. Like, the plot was decent. It wasn't anything like spectacular, but it was good. The book was interesting, but the dialogue was very low level dialogue, a lot of info dumping, and just did not sound realistic reading it at all. And that was my number one complaint with it. And I don't ever like to say that like writing is bad. Like, I think bad writing is very subjective and a lot of different things. So I don't ever like to call a book like bad writing, and I don't think this book was bad writing at all. I just think the dialogue could use some reworking that would make it better and that would make it more enjoyable, but I still enjoyed it. I think I went with 2.5 stars. I almost liked it. Like, I liked it, but I didn't like it, you know? Like, it was good for what it was. I could recognize some of the good things, and I didn't, like, I liked it enough to finish it, but I wouldn't buy it at this point. Like, I wouldn't buy it to put it on my shelf. Next up, we read Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the second book in It Happened One Summer, and this follows the sister from the first book and the best friend of the love interest from the first book, and they are now friends. Hannah has a huge crush on the director of the movie set that she works on. She is a production assistant, and Fox is one of her best friends, but he is like a major player. That's all he knows. He will never settle down. I don't think he's ever even had a girlfriend. He is just known as a player, and that's like his thing. But he finds himself kind of falling for Hannah, but knows that she likes this director, and then her movie set gets moved to Westport, so she ends up staying in his apartment for a few weeks while they are shooting this movie, and some feelings are emerging, and he is like pretending to help her out with the director situation while also trying to figure out his own feelings. It's just really fluffy, really cute. I liked it just as much as the first one. It is a little less smutty than the first one, which was kind of surprising. I thought they would be very similar, but this one definitely has less. But I do think that that is purposeful given like Fox's character development. I kind of liked that. Like, I like smut just as much as the next person, but I kind of liked the less amount in this book because of Fox's character development. I felt like it fit really well. So I would totally recommend it. I think I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I read The Fine Print. So this is by Lauren Asher, and it is a billionaire romance. So we are following 2 main characters. We have Rowan, who is a billionaire, and he is essentially the grandson of like this world's version of Walt Disney. And his grandfather has died, and they own, in order for him to own his part of the company, in order for him to receive his inheritance, he has to work as a director at the theme park for 6 months, and in that 6 months he has to figure out the park's weakness and come up with a plan to improve the park. So Rowan is the type of person to go at everything very analytically and very coldly. So he used to be an artist, he stopped doing any art, and he turned very cold, and so his first ideas for the park are like cutting employee salaries and losing employee benefits and laying people off and just trying to fix the bottom line kind of thing. But he ends up meeting this girl, and I don't remember her name, but she desperately wants to be a creator for the park. Her entire family works for the theme park, and she really wants to be a creator, and she has submitted a creation idea every year up until one of her ideas was stolen by her ex-boyfriend, and she ended up just kind of giving up on that dream. But she ends up deciding to submit a creation proposal one more time to Rowan. He accepts it, gives her a job as a creator, and she is basically forced to work for him, but he is super rude, super mean, and they don't like each other at all. On the flip side of things, he's also texting her pretending to be an artist, and she doesn't know it's him, but she really likes said artist, so there's kind of like a thing happening here. I gave it 2.5 stars. I wanted to like it. I think really I just don't like billionaire romances. I have very little patience for billionaires just in general, and I don't really care to read about them, honestly. So yeah, it just didn't really work for me. I can see why other people would like it. Like, there was decent smut, there was a decent little romance. I did think that it was kind of boring in certain parts, but like it was not bad. It just wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't a trope that I personally like, but I would recommend it to other people. Like, if you like billionaire romances, I think you will like this one. Personally, I don't like billionaire romances, so it just is what it is. Alright, and then the last book that I actually finished was Good Girl Complex. This is by Elle Kennedy, and we also follow 2 main characters here. So our first main character is Rowan, and he is a townie in this South Carolina beach town where there's a really ritzy college there that a lot of like really rich trust fund type of kids attend, and he is a bartender, and he gets in this fight with one of the college students, and the college student like threatens him and threatens the bar, and you know, the whole my dad's a lawyer kind of thing, and Rowan ends up losing his job over it because the bar owner doesn't want any trouble. Rowan ends up deciding that he is going to get revenge on this college student who basically ruined his life, and in order to get revenge he is going to basically expose this college guy's illicit affairs against his girlfriend to the girlfriend by making said girlfriend fall for him and getting her to break up with him, and then like there's gonna be this whole big reveal thing, and he's gonna be like, haha, in your face, I got your girl kind of thing, like, I guess. Said girlfriend's name is Mackenzie, and she is our other main character, and she is a self-made millionaire. She does come from money, like she comes from wealth. She is one of the college students, but she created her own website, and she took a gap year to kind of expand that website and has made a couple of million off of it, and she does not want to go to college. She doesn't see the need to go to college when she's already making millions of dollars and has all of these ideas for other businesses, but her parents force her to go. She's had this boyfriend, Preston, since they were teenagers. They're supposed to get married, like that's what the family expects, but then she meets Cooper. Did I call him Rowan earlier? I called him Rowan, didn't I? Rowan's the billionaire. Other book. This guy's Cooper. My bad. But she meets Cooper, and at first she's like, no, I have a boyfriend. But then the more he talks to her, the more she's like, okay, well, maybe. But you're fine with it because Preston's a jerk. And then it kind of spirals from there. And I'm well over my 30 minutes now. So I liked the book. I gave it 4 stars. I wish that it had been a little bit more slow burn. But other than that, honestly, it was a solid read. Great smut in that book, and I love Cooper as character. Like, he is absolutely my type of character. Loved him. I'm tired now. I've been talking for almost 45 minutes. This was supposed to be 30 minutes. Cool. So there were 2 books that I started this month and didn't finish. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about them, but I started Spinning Silver and Defy the Night. I didn't finish either of them. Spinning Silver I do intend to go back to. Defy the Night I think is probably more of a hard DNF. I don't think I'm going to go back to that one, but Spinning Silver I do want to finish in the future. So we'll see. So those are all of the books that I read in August. Sorry the video is so long, but it's fine. September is looking up less books. Probably going to read a lot more books than I have on my TBR for September, but I'm excited about the books that I'm going to read. So if you're interested in seeing the books that I'm going to read in September, I will link my TBR game for September down below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!